And welcome everybody to the Daily Space Weather. Looking at the sun here in 193 angstroms to see only one sunspot group about to set in the northwest, up here near my pointer. Active region over here producing a Z-class solar flare and a coronal mass ejection, not an Earth-facing one. And a coronal mass ejection watch continues. Here's another wavelength, 304 angstroms ionized helium from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. Massive plasma filament up here, and it looks like it's actually starting to make some moves here. It looks like it's drifting toward the northwest, an indication it will not face Earth when it ejects. I think there's a coronal mass ejection happening once again as we did the Daily Space Weather. Here's yet another wavelength, 171 angstroms. Note the flaring around the eastern limb and the lack of flaring around the degrading sunspot 2833, which has turned into an alpha class. Also an interesting region right here, gaining some magnetic complexity. We'll take a look at that at the end of the video. First, a bunch of other data. Here's the solar system. Here's where things will be in a week. We're right in the moment of a full moon here. And if you're up before dawn, you may see the bright, bright full moon, Jupiter and Saturn up there near the ecliptic. My star chart faces the south and includes the ecliptic. It's in the-sky.org. Next, thanks to our patrons. Thanks, patrons. You're largely the reason these videos are continuing to exist, remain publicly visible and free. So if you're viewing the videos and not a patron, perhaps thank our patrons as well. Even consider becoming a patron, even if you're not willing to open up your cobweb-encrusted wallet and send us a few bucks per month for the videos. Become a patron anyway, as many of our posts are public posts. In fact, we'll put one up this morning, patreon.com/smAsho, the 10.7 centimeter radio flux. The most proportional data set the sunspot number is at 80. Solar flux units, here's the graph of that on solon.info. The black line is the radio flux, the red line is the sunspot number. No geomagnetic storms or unrest forecasted by NOAA at the Space Weather Enthusiast dashboard. Fairly weak solar activity, some oddities happening yesterday as well. Global seismicity is in a lull of 7 magnitude earthquakes. We're seeing a massive drought over the past 90 days, as you can see on this convenient bar graph at volcanodiscovery.com. Here are your 4+ magnitude earthquakes over the past 24. And here are your 5+ magnitude earthquakes entirely occurring in the Western Pacific and around Australia. So an odd one here just off the coast of Australia while we were making coffee. Let's scroll up the list here. No major quakes. Again, a lull of 7 magnitude earthquakes continues, folks. And earthquake lulls typically end in large earthquakes, obviously. And we're just scrolling up the list here to see a lull in earthquakes, period. Not many quakes indeed. No deep quakes on the entire list here, it looks like. I stand corrected. There was a 5.6 at Indonesia. That was at 345 kilometers depth and a 5.6 magnitude. So the largest quake of the past 24 was a deep quake. Whether that matters, I am unconvinced. And here's a 4.2 at depth at Dominica in the Caribbean. Continuing on to see what volcanoes have been erupting. We go from seismicity to volcanology. Mount Etna. No ash emissions from Mount Etna. According to the most recent report, Suwanosejima exploded, produced an 8,000-foot plume of volcanic ash which drifted west. And apparently, magma is rising within the Ontake crater. Semeru on East Java produced a 14,000-foot ash plume. Dakono, 7,000-foot ash plume as it explodes on Halmahera. Fuego in Guatemala exploding, flight level 150. It's a 15,000-foot ash plume. Nevado del Ruiz, no volcanic ash observed in satellite. And Sabancaya exploding, producing continuous ash emissions, a 23,000-foot plume of volcanic ash. And here at smAshomash.com, we would remind you to not pole vault the caldera. It could be unhealthful, and chances are you're not Steve Stimpak. So please don't pole vault the caldera. We need the views on YouTube. And visit our own website as well, smAshomash.com. So we did have one significant solar flare here over the past 24 hours. It was while we did yesterday's show. It was a C-class flare. Since then, only B-class X-ray output from the closest star. That's the 3-day chart of GOES X-ray output. X-rays as measured by the GOES 16. No proton strikes from yesterday's coronal mass ejection and solar flare. Here's the 3-day chart of the GOES magnetometer, looking a little smoother here. In a bit of a moderate range. Pretty high lows and low highs in the past 24 hours on the GOES magnetometer. Here's a top view ecliptic plane field plot giving us some additional insight into heliospheric current sheet magnetism. North pole oriented shown in green, south pole oriented shown in red. Keep in mind this data is 1 hour and 47 minutes old. The Earth is solidly in a North Pole current sheet, and we don't expect any changes anytime soon. Keep in mind the magnetic environment can change with no warning. Here's the line of sight view of the same data, essentially. And we'll also show you the sun's B field and the coronal hole line of sight plot. So here you can see the sun's B field in blue, North Pole oriented coronal holes in green, South Pole ones in red. And we see some more North Pole oriented coronal holes stretching down toward the solar equator here. But not what we would call a trans-equatorial coronal hole. Pretty diffuse coronal holes here. And since the main features on the sun are coronal holes and sunspots, here are the animations of that. Again, sunspot 2833 is an alpha-class sunspot now. The likelihood of solar flares has dropped as a result of this. And these rising active regions over here on the eastern limb do not have any umbra yet, therefore they are not sunspots. KP index calm here, geomagnetic conditions KP of 1. And the KP index for you new viewers is a measurement of global geomagnetism. Let's take a look at some more of that. The induced portion at the real-time solar wind. So here are these weird gyrations we saw in the solar wind yesterday. We saw the BTBZ and the phi angle shift, and then we saw these 3 really obvious spikes in the density, accompanied by dips in the velocity. So that looks like coronal mass ejection ejecta, a series of low-speed pulses, where we saw the density increase, the velocity decrease, and the temperature increase in a very obvious pattern of 3 spikes in the density. After that, I went into a more normal regime here. That was a bit of an odd one. I don't think we've ever actually seen a signal like that on the channel. Current conditions are about 5 protons per cubic centimeter for the density of the solar wind, 331 kilometers per second for the velocity. Next, looking at geospace magnetosphere movies, here is pressure. And we're seeing very low pressure here over the past 4 hours. This should be 4 hours of data, courtesy University of Michigan. Fairly uneventful here over the past 4 hours, it looks like. Weak magnetohydrodynamic pressure surrounding the geospace right now. Most of it showing up on the non-sun-facing side of the planet. Next, looking at ground magnetic perturbations. Geospace delta B are changes to the Earth's own B field. And now you're looking at nanotesla instead of nanopascals. The magnetic flux density itself as opposed to magnetohydrodynamic pressure. Anyway, this 4 hours of data relatively uneventful as well. We show it daily since it's not yet visible in archival form. Next, we're going to blast through a quick cosmology segment. First, I'd like to thank all of our viewers over on YouTube. Thanks for pressing like and subscribe. If you're new to the channel, press like and subscribe. Tell your friends and foes about the content. Don't forget to check our playlist, youtube.com/smashamash/playlists. By the way, yesterday's live stream got demonetized. If it remains demonetized, it will be moved to BitChute only. So get that while it still exists on YouTube if you like, if you exclusively watch the content there. Also, check out our own website, smashamash.com. It's got links to our Discord chat, as well as our other sites. We're also on BitChute, thanks to our new subs over there. And we're not going to look at any random numbers today. We're going to welcome our viewers to the Neo Renaissance. By the way, thanks, Robert, for picking up a Condensed Matter Matters shirt, which will be today's featured product. Condensed Matter Matters. Stars are likely made of it. And here's one of the choices. It's got a 304 angstroms view of the sun and a cutaway to show a hexagonal lattice structure, something stars are likely made of. And let's just continue on to look at M99. Yes. M99, also known as NGC 4254, features some blue spiral arms here, so some very hot, large, active stars there out in the outskirts of that galaxy, and it's likely affected by the Virgo cluster. That's the astronomy picture of the day. You can look at it yourself at apod.nasa.gov. Next, checking electron flux around planet Earth to see no charging hazards. Here's the 1-year chart of the electron flux. We're just in a moderate range here, a normal range. Here's the 3-day chart. Nothing to write home about there. There's the forecast for electrons, and we're expecting a ramp down here. I would tend to agree with NOAA's forecast. The green boxes are the forecast, the yellow diamonds, the observations. Here's the total electron content forecast showing you the whole air column and the likelihood of GPS errors. And the redder you see the blobs of electron density, the more likely GPS errors are to occur. Again, it's showing you the whole air column, all the way from your GPS satellite down to your handset. Next, looking at the ionosphere, and we're looking at the F layer of the ionosphere, now just one slice of the atmosphere in vibrational frequency. Each blob represents 1 megahertz. Don't get megahertz. Enjoy knowing what's going on in the atmosphere. And we're seeing anomalies once again over South America and the south portion of the Central Pacific Ocean. So down here, surprising high vibration regions. We've documented it for the past approximately week. Ionospheric anomalies showing up just around the June solstice. Here's the latest image coming through at 8 o'clock Universal Time. So we just did our meteorology segment. There's a teaser. If you haven't watched that, check it out. Let's do bonus features, starting with the latest hydrogen alpha imagery from El Teide, Spain. So here, El Teide, Spain, the ground-based solar observatory. Great imagery here in hydrogen alpha of all of these filaments up here. And it looks like we're getting some motion happening. So the coronal mass ejection that we talked about could be occurring while we make the video. Let's take a quick glance at Stereo A before we close things out with more solar imagery. Stereo A, which by the way is located at Lagrangian point 5, right here by my pointer. And there's the view from the coronagraph on that spacecraft. Here's this massive plasma filament that we're talking about. And don't be surprised to see that eject later today. Here's the GO-16 SUVI map. Not really showing the motion of those filaments, but we showed it earlier. Moving on to show the high-res imagery of the solar intensity gram. So we see no additional umbrae there around sunspot 2833. I see no dark spots besides that. Looks like we've only got one sunspot group. These plages over here are not sunspots, as we don't see any umbrae. And this area of magnetic organization here didn't really turn into anything. There's that alpha class sunspot. Here's some additional imagery for you. This is a composite featuring 335 angstroms, which is ionized iron, and 1700 angstroms, which is just general extreme UV wavelength. Here's a close-up of sunspot 2833 in 171 angstroms ionized iron. And here's one more view in that same composite, 1700 and 335 angstroms. I like this composite wavelength. Let us know what you think of the new composite imagery in the comments. Tell your friends and foes about the channel. Press share, press the notification bell, press like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. We'll see you next time at the Daily Space Weather, and may that solar wind be at your back. Daily Space Weather, a regular feature of Smash News Network. Least busted name in news.